The West is failing, unfortunately, and many different reasons get the blame. Some people like to think that our politicians don't care about us, which crazy talk. But in today's video, I'm going to break down the real reason for this, which is that everyone is fat, sick, and depressed, and low-fat diets are the culprit. And then at the end of this presentation, I will show you some statistics that are very interesting to say the least. Let's look at some interesting data. Okay. So, for all of our existence, our brains have increased in size exponentially. Around 2.5 million years ago, when the most recent ice age started, humans became a strictly carnivorous species. And because we're eating lots of animal fats, which I'll get into shortly, our brain size grew at an extreme rate. However, 12,000 years ago, our brains stopped growing. In fact, they started shrinking. In the last 12,000 years, our brains have shrunk over 10%. What's very interesting with this timeline is that around 12,000 years ago, the Earth defrosted, well, for the majority of it did anyway, and so we started agriculture, and ever since then, our diet has been heavily plant-based. Now, only a complete moron would suggest that correlation equals causation. Yes, I'm looking at you plant munchers that try to say red meat is bad because of a few observational studies. So, let's look at why this happens. The human brain is built from roughly 25% carbon, 20 and 22 fatty acids, which we can only get from animal fat. Now, where things get interesting is that plants only have 18 carbon and below fatty acids, and the human body has a very limited ability at converting these carbon 18 fatty acids into the 20 and 22 that our brains require. Now, it can do this to a very small degree, which is why people that don't consume meat can still function, but this is what has led to, over time, our brains getting smaller and the average intelligence decreasing. And then we have nutrients essential for optimal brain function that can also only be found in meat, such as creatine, carnitine, choline, vitamin B12, the list goes on. There are many nutrients we literally cannot get from plants. So this right there is why everyone's stupid. Now let's look at the meat intake in the United States. The US average currently is around 2 kilograms or 4.4 pounds per person, right? Now, up until 12,000 years ago, all of our energy came from meat, which means we're eating, minimum 5 times less meat, so we have less of these carbon 20 and 22 fatty acids, and that is why we're all so stupid. Well, I should say, the majority of us are so stupid. Now, if we look at the nice chart I have on screen, we can see everyone's getting fatter and fatter, okay? But here's the thing, fat makes you fat, allegedly, that's what we've all been told. Let's have a look at this chart here. Red meat intake has decreased. Now, just to be clear, I am not strictly blaming carbohydrates for the reason that everyone's fat. I think vegetable oils are a huge contributing factor also. But let's have a look at how carbohydrates, which obviously we have to consume carbohydrates if we're on a low-fat diet, are making people fat. The first reason is you're not fat adapted, right? What I'm about to say, it sounds like bro science, but I promise you it is a real thing. Everyone who's ever done a ketogenic diet in their life knows this to be true. When you eat carbohydrates, your body runs on carbohydrates. When you eat fat, your body runs on fat. Now, when you run out of the carbohydrates you've eaten, your body is not very efficient at tapping into its own body fat because your own body fat and carbohydrates have vastly different molecular structures. But you run out of the fat you've eaten, and your body can very easily tap into its own body fat. This makes a significant difference. When you're eating carbohydrates, you get hungry every 3 hours. When you're eating fats, you very rarely get hungry. Then, if that wasn't enough, when you eat carbohydrates, massive blood sugar spikes, comes crashing back down, but it doesn't stop at its baseline level, it goes below that baseline, and your body thinks it's run out of fat. That's why you get ridiculously hangry at like 10 a.m. after you've eaten some toast or something for breakfast. Also, right, the blood sugar spikes up, another hormone known as insulin also spikes to bring your blood sugar back down. Now, when this insulin spikes, another hormone, which is a hunger hormone called leptin, is essentially responsible for saying to your brain, hey, we're full, we can stop eating now. That tries to elevate, right? And when you're not consuming carbohydrates and your blood sugar is not elevated, it has a clear passage to tell your brain it's full. However, because this insulin is elevated, insulin actually blocks this signal and you never get that sensation that you're full. It's why people think they have a second stomach for ice cream. You eat the ice cream, you get the massive blood sugar spike, boom, hungry again. And then there's the obvious one. You're no longer addicted to food. This hyper-processed garbage, it's designed in a way to make you addicted. Everyone who eats hyper-processed food knows this. You often will find yourself thinking about food during the day. You get these insane cravings and you just have this monumental desire to eat it. That vanishes when you remove the ultra processed food, which usually this type of food is high in carbohydrates. And even if you do get those keto bars, they're garbage too. Don't eat them. Now, let's think of a hypothetical scenario, right? Of course, this would never happen. No one is this stupid. Imagine you needed to replace this bad animal fats with something healthier, right? You'd have to get it from a plant source. Now, the thing with plants is that the stalk, stem, leaves, they have very little fat on them, right? So you have to get it from the seeds. Now, as we all know, plants have defense chemicals in them which are toxic for us, but they're even more concentrated in the seed because essentially it's the plant's baby, it's the plant's offspring. So the plant does whatever it can for its seed to survive. That's why many seeds, you literally can't digest them. It's a defense mechanism from the plant so that its seed can repopulate. Okay, so seeds are already the most toxic part of a plant. Then, to get it from seed into supermarket, you'd probably have to put it through a 13-step process. Now, you might notice on screen there is a gap between the two screenshots you see. And the reason for that is well, there were so many steps I couldn't fit them all into a single screenshot. So yeah, anyway, let's call this hypothetical food seed oils. And imagine we introduced these things, maybe 100 years ago. Let's say 1905. I would speculate that, all of a sudden, cool diseases started appearing out of nowhere. Anyway, it's very interesting how a low-fat diet, in particular a low animal fat diet, has detrimental consequences to society.